Learn from the leader.
We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, a new virtual series featuring senior Army leaders that provide important updates on key defense topics. Kicking off today's event is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Association of the United States Army, General Carter Ham.
Thanks for tuning in today for this online gathering. While meeting in person just isn't possible right now, we want AUSA's Noon Report to be a way for all of us who support America's Army to remain connected. Today's Noon Report reimagines AUSA's very popular breakfast series, bringing you top quality content from senior Army leaders, but in a live and interactive virtual format. At AUSA, we're carefully monitoring ongoing conditions resulting from the COVID-19 virus. As we look forward to future AUSA events, the health, safety, and well-being of our members, our industry partners, and our invited guests remain our top priorities. We remain fully committed to providing a safe and engaging experience as we continue planning for AUSA's events in 2020 and beyond. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to publicly thank the sponsor for this very first AUSA Noon Report, American Military University. I suspect many of you know of the great programs offered by AMU, and we at AUSA are deeply appreciative of AMU's sponsorship for today's event. When we thought about who the very first speaker should be for AUSA's Noon Report, the choice was obvious and unanimous. Who better to talk about matters affecting soldiers and their families than the Sergeant Major of the Army? SMA Michael A. Grinston became the 16th Sergeant Major of the Army in August of 2019. In this role, he is the Army Chief of Staff's personal advisor on all enlisted issues. He devotes the majority of his time traveling across the Army to observe training and to meet with soldiers and families of the total Army, regular Army, Army National Guard, and Army Reserve. He serves on a number of councils and boards that address soldier and family matters, and he routinely testifies before Congress on behalf of the Army. If you have questions for the SMA during the live session, just use the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. Now, please join me in welcoming SMA Grinston and our moderator today, the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army and AUSA's Vice President for Non-Commissioned Officer and Soldier Programs, SMA retired Dan Dailey.
General Ham, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm retired Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Dailey, and welcome to the first edition of the Noon Report. I have the honor of hosting the 16th Sergeant Major of the Army, Sergeant Major of the Army, Michael Grinston. SMA Grinston, thanks for being here with us today, and it's always a pleasure to have you here at the Association of the United States Army.
Dan, it's great to be here, and there's no real pressure on me, just so you know, because I can always default and say that anything went wrong, I could just kind of point it off on you and say, hey, it's a former SMA. But I'm really appreciate to be here. These are trying times for our soldiers and their families. We're going to get through this. We're going to kill the virus. But I'm really proud that General Ham invited me here to host and be a part of the first Noon Report. I'm really excited.
Well, this is all how we're going to change the way we do business. As I just want the listeners out there to realize that we are exercising social distancing today and being safe here with the Sergeant Major of the Army. But again, Sergeant Major, we thank you for giving us your time. We know that you and the leadership are working very hard to get after this pandemic for our nation, and we appreciate the amount of time that you give to us so you can communicate to our listeners. Just as a reminder, you heard General Ham say that if you have a question, please post that question. But before we go out to our live audience, I have a few questions that I know are very important to our listeners, Sergeant Major. You know, readiness is our top priority, both the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Army, and it is a core competency of our United States Army. How do you see our Army returning to collective training and increasing their readiness safely in the future?
Yeah. I get this question a lot. I get it from both sides. You know, we got an obligation as an Army to protect the nation. But in order to do that, we also have to protect the force. So we're looking at how we're going to bring folks in to do collective training. What we did is I went down to Fort Stewart and said, okay, how are we going to walk them through? show me how to bring people in. And what we're going to do is, keep them in small groups. But some people don't realize it's called, tactical dispersion has been something we've done for a very long time in the military. So as groups come in, it's usually when they first come in. So we're going to echelon how they come in. When they alert, they marshal. They'll be in groups of 5, and then they'll get a call forward. So if you're going to your tank crew, that tank crew once they draw their weapons, they'll go to a staging area, and they'll be called forward. They'll go in the motor pool. They get another screening. They'll get asked questions, wash your hands again, and then they'll move out to their tank, Bradley, or their crew. And then they may move out as a company, but, if it's an Armored Brigade combat team, big tanks, they don't do a lot of, close contact. They're bumping into each other. So we're going to bring them in waves, and we're not going to do big formations. That's how we're going to bring them in to do some of the collective training. But once they're out, we want to create the bubble. So when they're out in the field and you got tactical dispersion, you're staying out there, we got to limit those folks that come into that area. So it's the ones that are coming in and out that may, if we're all protected and we don't have any of the virus, it's going to be somebody that enters into that area. So we're calling them fault lines or some way that says, okay, when you cross here, we're going to limit the exposure. Okay, so if we bring food, it's going to be a drop-off location, and those folks that brought the food, they're going to move back. The unit will come over and get that. So we're very aware of making sure we maintain our bubbles and make sure that those that are in the bubble are protected from the virus so that we can get back to collective training. But we're also going to do some testing. We got test kits at all our locations. So there will be some random tests given to those that are out in the field while we're out there to make sure that they're still safe. And the biggest thing is we may even do some tests at the end. So at the end of our collective training, we're going to make sure that those people that go back to their homes and back to their families, that they still don't have the virus. We brought them in to do collective training. We have the protected bubble, but we may do limited testing before they even go back to their homes to make sure that they're clean as we go back from the training back to their homes.
Absolutely. We've all been impacted by the effects of this COVID-19, and you and I just recently did a podcast series, and we talked about the effects of the summer PCS cycle. I encourage everyone out there, if you haven't listened to that, it gives you great information from the Sergeant Major of the Army and other senior leaders throughout the Army through our podcast series. But Sergeant Major, can you give us an update on the summer PCS cycle? I know this affects a lot of our families, and this is the peak surge time of the year.
Oh, absolutely. Well, most people know that, the Secretary of Defense just put out some guidance for how we're going to do how we're going to come out of the COVID. And he talks about, 14 days in that area, in the local area, doesn't have any illnesses or flu-like symptoms, 14 days. So that's how we're going to open it up. But that also kind of shows how we're going to come out of and do PCSs. So originally, the Secretary memo says, we're just going to look at every 2 weeks, but we still have a stop move till the 30th. But we can't just say we're going to move on 1 July and you got to expect families to move on 1 July. So we published Frago 25, and in there it says 30 days prior to a move, you can, without an ETP, you can go ahead and start the PCS process. So, you don't need anything. So you got to schedule your household goods, and you can't wait till 1 July to go, okay, I want to do the household goods on 1 July. So if you're going CONUS, 30 days prior to 1 July, so 1 June, you can go ahead and start scheduling your household goods and start making your appointments for a move on 1 July. If you're going OCONUS, you would do 60 days prior. You can go ahead and start scheduling those things to help you move. But we're also very aware of, movers and coming in. So we've gone to Transcom and asked the moving companies to have their questions asked that, have you been with anybody that's been COVID positive in the last 2 weeks? Do you have any flu-like symptoms? So asking the movers that, but we're also asking the families to do the same. We're going to ask the chain of command to check on those folks while they're doing the PCS move. We're also going to say maybe that's their place of duty for the soldier. So, sometimes, and, maybe the former SMA may not have always been there for his household good. I was always there for mine. Yeah. But we want the soldier to be there for your household good move. and make sure that not only the movers are safe too. They, we don't need to do anything unsafe for them, but make sure they're wearing masks, they're wearing gloves. And anytime you're unsafe with how we're going to do the PCS or the movers, you call your chain of command and just stop, and we'll look into it. So we're putting in some extra precautions and this time so we can safely move our families. But it's going to be a peak season, and it's going to be challenging. But that's the Army. We do a lot of hard, challenging things. So we're confident when the moves start that we've got a safe way to make sure that everybody gets moved.
Well, that's great to hear, Sergeant Major. And so I just have one more question before we go out to our live audience. And just as a reminder, if you have a question, please post it, and we will do our best to try to get through as many as we can for the short time that we have the Sergeant Major of the Army today. Sergeant Major, I'm a huge fan of your initiative. And the second I heard it, I was a supporter of it. And I am actually a supporter of it through sponsoring some of the things that you're doing with the initiatives that we're going to come out with. That initiative is called This Is My Squad. And it's the grassroots effort focused on the squad. Can you give us an update on This Is My Squad and how you think it's going to increase lethality for our Army and change the culture of the squad?
Yeah. Well, This Is My Squad is, the bottom line. It's about a culture. It's a positive effect on everything that you look at. And when you look at something, it's like saying, we're in this is the new way we're going to do things, but we find ways to do it. We don't just say, hey, we can't do anything. The Chief of Staff of the Army says, can't telework to combat. So, we have to do some training. We have to be ready for the Army. But it's the culture and the mindset that says, I'm positive. This is the condition I've been given. I'm aware of what my soldiers are and what they do. And my favorite part of that is the personal pronoun of my, where I own it. It's, in my squad, I'm proud of them. I take care of them. I know them. And it's a cultural change where you have some ownership. You want to take some action. If you see something wrong, you take the action, and then you move on, you fix it. And it's an attitude of ownership. It's positive. And I think with a good positive attitude, where you own any issue that comes up, or you own the situation that you're in, and you look for the best and you move on, that's a cultural change. But I don't want to say we're going to stop with just saying, it's a cultural change. There's some fundamental things that we're going to do to help our squad leaders. And one of those, I've already asked for the Army Futures Command to develop an app just for the squad leader. I want it to be, world-class, where they can, you click on it and you get notified that you need to sponsor someone. Can you do your digital training book right there in the squad leader app? So for once, I really want to enhance digitally the squad leader. We got a long way to go. We're going to start doing that this year to see what we can come up with. We got a small group of squad leaders we're going to bring in. And so the soldier touch point is going to start with them. So it is about culture, but we're going to do some fundamental things on how we can increase their culture through some technology.
I'm excited to see it evolve, Sergeant Major, because it's energy focused in the right area down at the squad level. And we're all behind you with This Is My Squad. Sergeant Major, I can see the questions coming in, so we better get out to our live audience and answer a few of their questions. And the first question, Sergeant Major, is now that units are getting back onto the gunnery ranges and training areas, how are units doing field feeding? Is it MRE only, DFAC, or field kitchens?
Yeah, that's like I said, it's not going to be all MREs. Some people may want to do all MREs. I'm not sure why you want to do that. But if the field kitchens are in the bubble, it's still the same thing. They're out in the field. They're at the same, same way we're going to bring in that tank crew. We're going to bring in, we're alert and marshal the 92 Gulfs, the field feeding companies. So there will be a mix, and it's not just all going to be, MREs. But again, it goes back that even though we have everybody in the field, there's going to be separate bubbles. Like I said, so I'm over here and I'm in my, maybe in a life support area, and then I make the food, but I'm still out in the field. I've been checked. I've been asked the same questions. Maybe I'm had a test. And then now I'm going to bring the food over at a logistic resupply point. And I step back. The unit comes from their position, grab the food, go back, feed it. And then so there's not this big interaction where they would bring it maybe all the way into a training area where you kind of take the bubble. So it's a fire break you know, we all kind of meet at the fire break. You do one over here, I come over here, and then you go back to your separate bubbles. So that's kind of the concept of field fitting, and we're working through that at the National Training Center too, because the plan is to bring people. The Chief of Staff and I went out to the National Training Center and wanted to see how we could walk through bringing in people to the National Training Center, given the new normal that we have now. So we've looked at field fitting, but it's about creating the fire breaks, test and check everybody in the field. You're in your fire break, you may be over here. If you got to mix a little bit, you do limited interaction, and then you go back.
Yeah. SMA, it sounds like back when we were first sergeants, we had to go to a resupply point to pick up chow and then bring it back to the company, right? And take it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good. Well, let's go out to another question from our live audience. Can you please talk about the new tools added to the Army's training network, such as the digital job book, and how those are helping with training during the COVID situation?
Yeah. The digital job book is now online. It's not CAC enabled. I went back to the Combined Arms Center and said, please don't make it, you know, it's got to use your CAC card to get into it. The digital job book, you can now log on as a squad leader, just give a log on and password. You can actually go in there, you can update your information. It'll upload into DTMS. So I think that's enhancing. It's not exactly where I want it to be. Again, in my squad app, I want it to be at the bottom, a little button. I just click on it. So, but it's already digital. You can go in there and you don't need your ID card and a PIN to get into it. You'll have to go in at one point to make sure your login, your password are correct with your ID card. If you already know that, you don't need that. And then you can get into the digital job book from the website.
Well, that's a great update. Thank you, SMA. You know, the next one is really important, and it's one that I know that we're all concerned about. Retention seems to be going very well in the Army, and I'm sure it's easy to keep people right now. But how is recruiting going? Is there challenges out there? I mean, we see the unemployment across the nation, and can you give us an update on how our recruiters are doing and what it looks like for the end of the year?
Yes, I think we're doing well. Now, we did take a little pause on our sessions, but just like we closed most of the, most of the nation, just kind of had some kind of closure. We closed some of our recruiting stations, but I mean, I can't tell you how proud I am of the recruiters and what they did. We were in California, we went to one of the recruiting stations, and we were talking about virtual recruiting. And one of the staff sergeants in there said, yeah, I've done, 39 enlistments, in the Army. I'm like, hey, you did better with virtual recruiting than, we've done with actual recruiting stations. So, we really got ahead of this about a year ago. And when we started, doing a different marketing, starting back and doing things in the digital space, really led us up to this. And so when we did the brick and mortar closures, we already had some of the digital recruiting going, and some of the recruiters just really took off. So I believe we're going to slowly going into, we're not going to just go, okay, everything stop and go back to shipping as we were. So right now the plan is we're shipping 50% of what we were, and then we're going to increase that over time because we got some learnings. We got social distancing going on in basic training. So clearing out the barracks for basic training where you may have 60 troops in an open bay, now you got 30. So we had to work through all that space, and we're already gradually increasing the flow of getting into basic training and then getting on the AIT. And that all plays into how we bring folks on. But we're seeing recruiting going well, retention as well. We've done extensions, that's all going well. But virtual recruiting has gone exceptionally well. We've had to learn how to bring in contracts. So doing a FaceTime with a recruiter, and that's how you do your first meet with the recruiter. It's just new. It's we've got some phenomenal lessons learned. So I'm confident that we're going to meet our in-strength goals for this year.
Oh, that's good to hear. And it's good to hear that the Army's open for business and we're hiring, right?
Oh, yeah. So, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, thanks, Sergeant Major, for that update. Now, this is one of my favorite subjects, Sergeant Major, and it's a touchy one for a lot of people out there, but you and I get motivated when we hear this. The ACFT was already a logistical challenge before COVID because of all the equipment required, especially for the Army National Guard, the Army Reserve, those desegregated organizations out there that are away from the flagpole. What's the way ahead for the ACFT, especially with soldiers sharing equipment and sanitation requirements?
Yes. Well, first of all, the fielding is going actually well. We had some delays in some of the equipment, but AMC is confident that every unit will still have their equipment in their locations by June.
Yeah.
So we'll hold AMC to that standard. So
no excuses either.
No
then.
excuses now. We got to get, so that's just the test equipment. So we got to get the equipment out. So I think we'll have the test equipment before October. But some units have, we look at what Korea did. They left their gyms open, and they just like you have here. You had some hand sanitizer, and when a soldier used the equipment, you just kind of wiped it down. That's actually what we're doing for training. So when you go to before you get to a gunnery, you have to do the gunnery skills test. You have to take apart the 50 cal or the 240. You got to do some breech maintenance. So if only one soldier can do that, no. What we're doing is soldier does that. You may go in reverse. So you assemble it, and then you take it apart. If you're the soldier, then you wipe the parts down, and then the next soldier assembles the breech, then takes it apart, wipes the breech down. And that's how we're doing the gunnery skills test. It's the same thing you're going to do with your ACFT equipment. No, if you touch the bar for your max deadlift, you get your wipe, you wipe the bar down, and then you move on to the next station. Good news is hand release push-ups and a lot of grass in the world. You probably could spread out pretty good with that. So most of those things in the Army Combat Fitness Test are actually social distance. What's actually more challenging is the old APFT, where you would actually hold the feet. So we've actually gone modification. We've already said it. If you haven't passed the APFT and you need to take one, we are allowing a modification where you would get a bar and you do your sit-ups with a bar. If somebody's counting your push-ups, stay 6 feet away, and you count the push-ups, and then you go for your run. You're not going to do a run with a company, where you're all lined up and there's 100 people at the go line. So we're staggering that. So if you're going to do a current Army physical fitness test, we're just not going to do it with 150 at the start line for the 2 mile. And the ACFT doesn't allow for that anyway. There's like 18 lanes. And once you get to the finish, because it's a running clock, you would have to, immediately start. So it doesn't facilitate, large groups of folks running anyway. So I think we're confident when we start the ACFT that we can do it given the conditions of a COVID-19 environment.
Absolutely, Sergeant. I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of your morning Twitter post, your physical fitness training post, reminding them soldiers out there that there's no excuse, right, Sergeant Major?
Yeah, no excuse.
No excuse to do PT, and it's always a great opportunity. Well, Sergeant Major, this one's near and dear to my heart because the previous Sergeant Major of the Army had the foresight to put us in a great military uniform that I think is going to take us into several thousands of years of Army wear. But can you give us an update on the Army Green Service uniform?
Yes, everybody's, most people are waiting with bated breath for the new Army Green Service uniform. We have had, for obvious reasons, we have had a delay in the fielding of the Army Green Service uniform. We were supposed to get that in June, July out in the AFES. Yeah. But that same manufacturing companies, sometimes the same one we use masks, these are, cloth, it's material. So we're hopeful that we'll get the Army Green Service uniform in the hands of the drill sergeants and the new recruits in the fall, October. But again, the conditions, if the factories we can't get those ramped back up. We got to get safely get the factories workers back in there. We've had a short delay, but it's coming. It's a great uniform. Everybody likes it. So we're confident we'll get it out in the fall. So there is about a 3-month delay on the Army Green fielding of the Army Green Service uniform.
Well, I'm excited to see that soldiers are excited about an Army uniform. The last time this happens, we went from the banana suit to the great PTs, right? So, But thank you for that answer, Sergeant Major. This one is really important too, Sergeant Majors, because professional development is key to development of our soldiers and non-commissioned officers. And I hear this one quite often: is how is the Army planning to conduct schools such as BLC, ALC, SLC in the coming years with this crisis and pandemic?
Well, the good news is we actually never stopped BLC or the basic leader course or the master leaders course. They came to me, and right when this started off, we had, Korea and Italy were kind of leading, and we got forces in Korea and Italy. And they said, and I started a weekly, what I called the Pulse of the Force, brought the 3-star CSMs across the world And we just come on the net and shared our ideas. And I said, well, did you stop the basic leader course in Korea? They said, no, we didn't. I said, well, what'd you do? Well, we spread everybody out. We did things through the digital learning board, Blackboard. I said, okay, well, Italy, what are you doing? Oh, we're doing the same thing. So when the memo came out, and they came to me and they said, we want to suspend select, train, educate, promote requirements where you have to go to your professional military education before you get promoted. I said, well, we're not going to suspend that requirement for the basic leader course or the master leader course, because the senior sergeant majors and the leaders in the Army felt confident that we could do the basic leader course and the master leader course through digital learning. So those two didn't stop. And we did suspend STEP for ALC and the advanced leader course and the senior leader course. And we're going to review that every 30 days. The first time we promoted folks without that requirement was 1 May. And we're going to review it again on 1 June to see, do we still need to do that? And TRADOC has a really good plan on how to do the advanced leaders course. And in those courses, you do actually need to come in to actually go to attend the course. It's hard to get trained. You got to bring it in, got to get some hands on the Bradley or a tank or whatever that is. But we're looking at innovative ways to do Blackboard so that we can minimize the time on the TDY, because I think we're running some phenomenal lessons learned on how to do things through distance learning. And we're going to look at, as we ramp this back up, we can limit the amount of time that they would have to go TDY. So if the course was 6 weeks, we cut that down to 3 weeks. Therefore, we can run more courses and we can get after that backlog that we just created because we gave an alibi for the STEP.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. Let's switch focus to families. One of the families wrote in and they said, will families going to OCONUS be allowed to select commercial carriers versus the military selected carrier? And with so many families moving, how will all members of the family be protected from COVID-19 in very full flights?
Yeah, so, what we've already done, for the answer to the first part of the question, commercial versus, the military flight. If you're going to Korea right now, we want you on our flight, the Patriot flight. So you do your self-quarantine. We don't fill up the plane. It's pack up, I've been in that flight, commercial flight, you're in the middle seat and back row. So we're just not filling up the flights. If it's a Patriot Express like we did to Korea, that's where we can control that. So still would prefer when you're going to Europe and Korea that we're gonna fill up we won't fill it up. We'll have some social distancing within the aircraft, and those families will come down. And then they're going to be quarantined. If you're a family, we're trying to have sponsorship is going phenomenal right now. So we want to have your house ready, and you can move right into your house so that if you're going to quarantine, you're not quarantining a hotel, you'll have your house.
Yeah.
It'd be no difference where you're at this location, that location. So our sponsorship's going much better. We want you to take the Patriot Express versus the commercial, because then I think we can control that. We can receive you on a bus. We kind of know the conditions. We're going to give you a test. So Korea is testing. When you land in Korea, I can't remember the date, it's the first day or the last day, but during that sometimes they do some testing right there as you come off the aircraft, or at some point in time, we want you to quarantine in a hotel. So we're looking at every aspect to make sure the families are safe. We want to make sure that you're safe when you get on the plane. We'll ask you the same questions. Are you sick? Do you have any symptoms? And if you don't get on the flight. But we would prefer you to take the Patriot Express if you're going to Korea or Europe.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we have time for about one more question. We'll go back out to our audience, Sergeant Major. And the audience says, when will soldiers have to quarantine going to and from the deployments? And how long will that be? Can you talk to us about what the procedures would be so we make sure our families are safe?
Okay. I'd like to say we're not perfect yet. So we're still working on this. So I know right now that we've got somebody that said quarantine 14 days before you deploy, and then you move to the next location, and then you get to Kuwait and you had another 14 days you're quarantined there, and then you're getting to Iraq and you do it's 45 days worth of quarantine. We're trying to stop that, but again, we want to make sure everybody wants, when you get there, they want you to be able to fight right now. And that's why it's important to take that aircraft But we don't always deploy on our aircraft. You know, sometimes we get other aircraft. But we're trying to, between the G3 and those combatant commands, to kind of limit the quarantines, because it's becoming, 45 days, and we don't want to do 45 days on the reverse to come back. I actually believe the coming back's a little easier. We'll just bring you back. We'll do quarantine back at Fort Bragg, and we set up a site to do that. But it's getting there that we are having our challenges. And the goal, what the COCOM wants is they want us to quarantine here, and then when you get there, you're ready. But we got procedurally, we got to work through that because we're spending a lot of time. But some of it is not us. These are the locations. If the country says you will do this, I mean, we can't go to the country and say, no, we're not going to do that. So yeah, we got to work through that. That's what I mean. We still have some things to work through. This is not just us doing it to us, but it's the countries are saying these are the requirements before you come to the country. So we got to work through that so that we don't spend 45, 90 days doing quarantine.
Good. Well, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, our time has come to close the first edition of the Noon Report. And all of us from the Association of the United States Army want to thank Sergeant Major of the Army Grinston and all of our soldiers for everything you do. Thank you, Sergeant Major, for being with us today. We apologize for not being able to get to all your questions, but we will provide the Sergeant Major of the Army's office a list of those questions so he has them. At this time, I'd like to give the floor back to the President of the Association of the United States Army, General Carter Ham.
Well, thanks, SMA Grinston and SMA Dailey, for a great discussion and for the insights and updates that you offered to all of us. All of us at AUSA, and indeed across the Army, are thankful for your leadership and for the selfless service of you and your family. Before we go, I want to make sure you know of some upcoming events. Our next AUSA Noon Report will be on Monday, June 8th, with Dr. Bruce Jetty, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. Noon, obviously, Eastern Daylight Time, Monday, June 8th, with Dr. Jetty. And on Wednesday, June 10th, we're very happy to host an event with General Mike Murray, Commander of Army Futures Command. That will be at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Wednesday, June 10th, with General Murray. For more information and to register for these and other AUSA events, simply go to AUSA's website, ausa.org. And while you're on the AUSA website, please take the opportunity to review and update your membership. Or if you're not a member, which is kind of hard to believe, that's the easiest way to join, ausa.org. Thanks again for joining us for AUSA's Noon Report with Sergeant Major of the Army Grinston. And once again, many thanks to American Military University for their sponsorship of today's very first AUSA Noon Report. I hope everyone has a great Army Day.